Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healthcare Innovation Podcast. Today, we have with us our special guest, Robin Farmanfarmaian. Robin is a public speaker, a healthcare entrepreneur, somebody who has deep expertise on using AI in healthcare, in medical devices, pharmaceuticals, and works with an audacious goal of impacting 100 million patient lives over her lifetime. So welcome, Robin, to this episode of the Healthcare Innovation Podcast.
I'm so excited to talk to you, especially because of your work in acoustic biomarkers. That is such an interesting area.
Thank you so much. So, Robin, I have heard many of your talks and I'm a big fan, but for our listeners, some of them might not be familiar with your background and your work. So maybe if you can do a brief introduction, what got you started into doing what you do today?
Sure. So I am in Silicon Valley. I live in downtown Palo Alto, which is just about walking distance to Stanford University. And what I do is I've worked on over 20 early stage companies in things like curing cancer with small molecules found through AI for drug discovery. Currently, I'm advising remote patient monitoring companies as well as VR for radiology. But the reason I decided to get into healthcare is because as a teenager, I was misdiagnosed with an autoimmune disease. I've all told had 43 hospitalizations, 6 major surgeries, and 3 organs removed. By the time I was 26, my doctors had me on extremely high dose opioids, and I absolutely hated them. So I asked to get off of them, and they said, well, next step could be to surgically implant a morphine pump into your spine. At that point, I said a very few choice words in my head, fired my entire healthcare team, took myself off the medication, ended up building my care team with doctors that really listened to me and treated me like someone on the team. I ended up getting diagnosed correctly with Crohn's disease, put on a medication called Remicade, and after 24 hours, I went into remission.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and that was, quite a few years ago. So now my goal is to really impact 100 million patients worldwide, because I know I'm alive today, not just because of that one doctor or that one pharmaceutical company, but worldwide, globally, so many different companies working on pharmaceuticals and medical devices and AI-based software. And these all have massive impact across multiple diseases.
So, Robin, I am someone who does a lot of work with pharma companies, and generally everyone thinks pharma is an evil force. So I'm so excited to hear that someone sees the positive side to what pharma brings to the table. So Robin, today I'm super excited for us to talk a little bit more about your book on how AI can democratize healthcare. And before awesome. I am still waiting for my signed copy. But so Robin, how did you conceive the idea of this book, and then maybe what are some of the top things that you cover in this book? If we can start with that, and then there is a list of questions I have that I want to ask you.
Sure. So I realized about 4 or 5 years ago just how much AI was accelerating. I covered it in my first book, The Patient as CEO, and I wrote that in 2014, 2015. And of course, it was already powerful, but we have hit the inflection point in the last 3 or 4 years, and it is just going completely upwards right now. And so in the book, I cover things like remote patient monitoring and how doing continuous monitoring of vital signs the amount of data we can get on that in the patient's home is going to dwarf everything that exists in clinics and hospitals, right, over the next few years. And when you think about artificial intelligence, Ray Kurzweil is a good friend of mine, and he has a quote: "Life begins at 1 billion data points," right? And so being able to do clinical grade remote patient monitoring, regardless of where somebody lives, is a game changer. And that way you can, of course, tap into the predictive analytics. I also cover digital therapeutics, which are prescription apps, typically by prescription, that are used in conjunction with other medical interventions like therapy and medication. And so what these digital therapeutics are doing, they're not necessarily treating the disease directly, like a pharmaceutical drug. What they are doing is they're helping patients with everything else that comes along with having a chronic or even acute disease, right? So imagine something like diabetes, right? The app will help you with things like tracking your glucose, or nutrition and hydration tips or exercise tips, really taking care of like the mental side and the behavioral side of really being a patient. And I also have a full chapter on vocal biomarkers. And this is such an incredibly interesting area right now. So a vocal biomarker is essentially using a patient's voice as an actual vital sign. And so looking at companies like Sond Health, Sond has identified 4,000 unique features to the human voice, right? So when thinking about the fact you can collect the human voice really easily in the patient's home, right? And so one company that's really interesting in this space is Hyphe. Hyphe, Hyphe. And what they're doing is they are counting the number of times someone coughed. Think about that for a second. That is a pretty big deal. Imagine you have a chronic cough and you go into your doctor and the doctor's like, hey, Robin, how's your cough doing? How many times do you think you coughed yesterday? I don't know, 7, 400, 3,002. Like, we have no idea. So just the ability to count the number of times someone coughs is a game changer in and of itself.
Wow.
And so we're going to be seeing over the next 3 years a massive explosion in the world of coughing apps, right? I know of already 5 that are on the market, and Pfizer recently bought a company in Australia called ResApp for I think 175 million Australian, which is about 115 or 118 US. And so they paid a lot of money just to be able to acquire one of the many companies doing the counting coughing. And so that's a really interesting area. And then of course I close it on the implications of generative healthcare, right? Generative AI. And so I talk a bit about what OpenAI was doing. And my book came out before ChatGPT. And so I can only talk about GPT-3
Yes.
and some of the interesting areas that it can really change healthcare.
Fantastic. So you've covered a wide gamut of topics, like you said. But maybe to start with, right? Typically, like how AI is changing both at the level of preventive and diagnostic. And I live in India. The healthcare system is still at an evolutionary stage. So access to healthcare is a huge challenge. Prevention and screening of diseases is a huge use case. Maybe if you can highlight a couple of examples and also show like how AI is making an impact in terms of being able to do things which were not possible before.
So let me give you one example. There's a company called Vital Connect, and what it is a single lead EKG monitor that sticks to the patient's chest for 24 hours. It's this tiny little sticker, right? It's so much easier than having a connected device. And it's so tiny that you can get this to patients in rural environments. They put it on, it's just a disposable, and they can track continuously things like the EKG, right? And so what they have done is not only are they democratizing healthcare to patients who may not otherwise have any access whatsoever with this high-end clinical grade device that is now like this big and weighs nothing. They have done a study and they were able to predict with 6.5 days advance notice of a cardiac hospital readmission. Right, that is a massive amount of time to give someone before they start to crash at the level where they need to be hospitalized. And so that in and of itself is a game changer. But then thinking about some of the diagnostics that are going on, right? So thinking about some of the even in-home blood labs and in-home urine labs can be mailed anywhere, right? And so you don't have to go into things like a blood clinic or a hospital or clinic of any kind, or even get a phlebotomist to your home. You can get these packs in the mail. They cover everything from colon cancer to your CBC, your liver function, kidney function, thyroid function. In case you have a hot date coming up, they cover most of the STDs. So what you do is you just prick the end of your finger in the ones that are blood-based, and you get capillary blood, which goes into a little tiny container, and then you throw it back in the mail. Right. And so these kinds of innovations, even though that one's not particularly AI based, will go hand in hand with being able to do the remote patient monitoring and having that robust hospital at home without having to have a human being that helps it out. And even sometimes having just like a day nurse. So someone who lives in the surrounding area to go in and like start an IV or check on the patient.
Very interesting. You talked earlier about a billion data points is where AI starts, right? So is there a fundamental shift in terms of the amount of data being collected that is making things happen, and which maybe some of us might not have noticed, but where is that large amount of data coming from today?
Sure. So in the US, we just came down with some federal laws around interoperability, which is going to make a big difference being able to extract all the clinical grade data that are in the electronic medical records used in hospitals and clinics. But I would mention that data isn't as helpful, right? Because let me tell you why, right? It's not continuous and it's not done in the patient's own environment. And so there's something called white coat syndrome. Your blood pressure is higher at a doctor's office than it is in your daily environment for multiple reasons, whether you have anxiety around going to the doctor, or you just ran up the stairs because you were late, or you were stuck in traffic for a while and you're just a little bit dehydrated. And so taking someone's blood pressure 1 to 4 times a day is not all that helpful, right? And taking it for being able to train artificial intelligence. And then thinking about the fact that most of that kind of data up until recent years has been on patients at their sickest and not at their healthiest, right? And so we don't know what that means to have continuous blood pressure monitoring, being able to give us these giant clinical grade databases on patients in their home environment. That is a really big deal. And so thinking about 2 companies, so BioIntelliSense, it has a single lead EKG, just like Vital Connect, sticks to the patient's chest. They take over 1,400 measurements every single day. But there's one that's even better. There's a BioBeat, and it's a bigger device, and it fits on the chest as well, but it's a little bit harder and everything like that. They use something called PPG technology, photoplasmography. PPG technology has been commercialized in the pulse oximeters at the end of the finger since 1982, right? And so they're taking this old technology, but applying it in a new way. And by having that sensor here and doing the continuous monitoring, they are actually continuously monitoring 13 vital signs, which means they are taking millions of data points on every single patient every single day.
Wow, that is a lot of data points being collected.
Exactly.
And
so it's
across the world.
These wearables. Yep.
So another piece about AI, which I always talk about, is AI is most effective when it is ubiquitous, right? When it disappears into the background and you don't even know where AI is applied. And people have these notional debates that will AI replace a doctor? Will it not replace a doctor? But that's not the real debate. There are many things that AI is doing and you don't even see it. Any particular examples that you cover in your book which you think are very relevant?
Thinking about, let's see. Well, in terms of like replacing the actual physician, is that what you want to like?
No, more where AI is ubiquitous, where people don't even know that AI is playing a role in terms of changing their healthcare.
Okay. So yes, that is on the horizon. It's not as ubiquitous as, say, in the world of Google search, right? Because there's so much more data to train things on. And so you do need all of that training data. And so that will start to shift a little bit more. So we don't see it as ubiquitously in the background, but we are starting to see it and we don't even know it's there. So thinking about digital therapeutics, there's a company called Twill Health, and Twill has already launched in 190 countries. So it's available all over the world. It addresses a number of different things from anxiety to depression. You know, it's that 24/7, coach in your pocket or in your smartphone. Now, because it's based in machine learning, it does actually learn about the patient over time. And so with things like their medication adherence reminders, because that's of course a big problem, changes the approach on how it interacts with the patient over a period of time. That is a really cool way of it. Yeah, it's like in the background, you have no idea that it's personalizing itself to you over, days or weeks.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And I guess as it starts happening across diseases, the kind of impact it can generate at scale is just unbelievable. And at least in my mind, scale is super important, right? Like, because a counselor could also do personalized counseling, but there is a limit to how much that can be covered versus AI can scale to an infinite level. So one question I had is, as you viewed these companies and trends, are there any challenges that you noticed in terms of scaling AI to a global level where it's accessible to everyone for healthcare?
I have not, I mean, beyond the physical, right? So you need to have connectivity and you need to have some type of a device. And those are by far the two biggest limiting things, right? Once you've got someone with a smart device that has enough capability, it's not a 1985 computer, it's a 2000 something,
Something
smartphone or
basic.
computer. Yeah, exactly. As long as that is able to connect to the internet, there is no reason that you wouldn't be able to apply AI that, unless it's, proprietary and behind walls of corporations. But there's no individual reason beyond those physical ones that you wouldn't be able to access other people with it.
Got it. Got it. Are there any other challenges that you see in terms of scaling AI in healthcare, Robin, which you would like to share?
Oh my gosh, there are tons. The reason is because healthcare is so complicated. And it's not just healthcare that's complicated, biology is complicated, right? And so that in and of itself, thinking about some of the predictive analytics that have been out there for quite a few years. Epic is one of the electronic medical records companies. It's a giant one. And so Epic has something that is septic shock, like a predictive analytic for someone who's going to be septic. And that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that as medicine, healthcare, the industry has not clearly defined what is sepsis, right? Like we don't have like the thing that says yes or no, a patient has sepsis, right? It's a collection of different different vital signs and other markers. And so going back in, sometimes people doing these, big studies after the fact says, well, Epic sepsis software doesn't necessarily work the way it should be working because it might miss people. And then sometimes it will see in the EMR, the electronic medical record, that a patient's on antibiotics, which is an indication you are already treating them for sepsis. And so it was flagging those as well. And the doctors are like, we already know she has sepsis. We wrote it down in the notes and she's on antibiotics. And so it's just biology is that complex, right?
True. I think that we had noticed that while training an acoustic biomarker for infant cry, where the training data set itself was so difficult, like half the time the mother would not know why the infant is crying. And so when you train the data on such a data set, you don't know how can AI predict a good outcome. But so I had in my mind many limitations around what AI can do and had my own timeline around how AI will take over the world. But in last 3-4 months, everything's changed with ChatGPT, the generative AI. Would love to hear your take on generative AI and what possibilities it'll open up and how fast.
So it's already happened, right? It's like there are already companies that I know of that are utilizing not just ChatGPT, but GPT-4, right? And so in my last book, I ended it on talking about the implications of ambient healthcare computing, right? Using generative AI, meaning the sensors on your walls that are tracking air quality and temperature and fall detection, combined with the remote patient monitoring devices that are doing continuous blood pressure, pulse oximetry, and EKG, all combining to make your entire environment and your body, an IoT, so that generative AI is able to really catch things long before they start, help patients change behaviors and be healthier. But some of the earliest applications that already are being used is a company called Be My Eyes. So Be My Eyes was created in 2015 for people with low vision or who are blind. right? And so what it is it uses a big pool of volunteers. And if you are someone with low vision and you want to see what's in your refrigerator, you can hold up your phone and either take a picture or video, a FaceTime type call with one of the volunteers, and they will tell you what's in your refrigerator. Well, they've already plugged in GPT-4 to replace a lot of the volunteers. And so when that same patient is in front of the refrigerator with the photo or the video, not only will the software tell them everything that exactly what it is in their refrigerator, you've got your yogurt and then there's the milk and then there's the cheese, whatever it is, but it will immediately also be able to do things like tell the expiration dates, and it simultaneously gives you a number of recipes that can be made just using the ingredients that you happen to have in the refrigerator.
Wow.
That exists now, right?
Wow.
Another interesting company in this space, and this is really the lowest hanging fruit, and we're going to see a lot going on with this particular area, is Nabla Copilot, Nabla. And so they've actually been an OpenAI customer for paying customers since 2020. And so what they do is in the clinic visit with the patient, and whether that's telemedicine or whether that's, in a clinic, it automatically transcribes all of the visit and puts it into the electronic medical record with the clinical summary, automatically does a patient summary right afterwards, and then any other endpoints. So if the doctor mentioned a prescription for X drug, the Nabla will immediately write the prescription and send it to the correct drugstore that is already in the patient's records, right? And so all of a sudden, overnight, this is already happening.
Wow. Wow. So, and the speed at which it's happening is mind blowing. Like in January, we read about ChatGPT 3.5. Now it's 4, and it's just happening at a super fast pace. So, Robin, I'm an entrepreneur. A lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs. So here's the question. AI is moving so fast. If I want to start something in this space, if someone wants to start something, how do they keep up? How do they look for the right opportunities and chase them?
So, well, first of all, go with your passion, right? Because if you love the area that you're working on and you're good at it, it's not going to be work. Like, I get up every single day and I jump out of bed and I'm super happy, and nothing I do feels like work, right? And so first and foremost, you got to find that. You got to have your passion. And then within that, if you're like, okay, well, I want to do something with AI software, start doing things like sending yourself Google alerts, right? I have a Google alert on democratizing healthcare. And so all over the world, I get 1 or 2 things a day that comes out and uses that term. And I keep up to date with that. I read a number of different things like Stat News and a lot of the other like medical device kind of newsletters. And within that, I'm like, okay, well, what do I like within these things? And me personally, I've picked things like companies like Bioformis, which is the platform that aggregates all of the data and facilitates hospital at home and remote clinical trials at home and things like that. So I identify that focal biomarkers are incredible. And so starting to think about that kind of side, right? So where is that for you? And then what is going on in that particular niche that you decided you want to go into? And who are some of the top companies, right? And once you map out the top companies in your interest area, start interacting with them, right? A lot of the time as a speaker, I also do business development. So one of the things that I look and I find where certain people are speaking, like say I want to meet a certain investor, I find where they're speaking, and then I get myself on that same stage. So you can also, another big trick if you're not a professional speaker, is volunteer for the event, right? So if there's an event with a whole bunch of the people that you've already mapped out that you like, go and volunteer to be the one at check-in. Because if you are the one at check-in, you have the full attendee list that you can take a photo of and look up on LinkedIn the next day. But that means you are the only person at that entire event that interacts with every single person who comes in the door, right? And so that way you're going to meet the right investors, you're going to meet the right CEOs and other founder entrepreneurs, you're going to meet the right physicians that are in that, and you're going to meet the right things like lawyers and marketing aspects and all of that. And so, yeah, that's your roadmap.
Love that. I love the hustling idea and spirit. So, Robin, I have one last question for you, and have to ask that after having tracked your work over the years, what's the next book going to be about?
The healthcare metaverse.
Healthcare metaverse. That's the next one.
Yep.
Awesome. We would
Yep.
really look forward to reading that one. Well, Robin, before we close, anything else you would like to share with our listeners as one last parting message?
It is an incredibly exciting time to be an entrepreneur, and do not let anything limit you, right? So if you didn't study AI in school, don't let that limit you. Don't let your education limit you to a certain area. If you want to do it, you absolutely can. There's no reason you can't. So go for the moon.
Well, that's a great parting message. Go for the moon. We'll keep that in mind. Well, Robin, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your insights on how AI is disrupting healthcare. It was real fun doing this episode.
I had so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much for having me.